Today, if you walk through Ho Chi Minh City, you will see much activity and bright lights. Millions of motorbikes fill the wide six-lane streets. Modern glass skyscrapers stand next to old French buildings from a long time ago. Inside big shopping malls, people buy new phones and makeup from other countries. Outside, small stalls sell tasty local food like banh mi. Young professionals work on laptops in cool coffee shops. Teenagers post videos on the internet. Many tall construction cranes show new buildings going up everywhere. It is difficult to imagine that this lively city was once part of a country in deep trouble. Not long ago, in the 1980s, Vietnam was extremely poor. It had suffered greatly from a long and damaging war. At that time, it was poorer than countries like Somalia, Ethiopia, or Madagascar. Many people did not have enough food, and extreme starvation was a real problem for families. The country was also isolated from much of the world, alone and struggling to find a way forward. So, how did Vietnam change from a war-torn, isolated country to an Asian economic powerhouse in just one single generation? This is an astonishing mystery. How did a socialist government, which usually follows strict rules, begin to use tools normally found in capitalist systems? They used these new ideas to save their people from extreme poverty and build a strong economy. The answer to this big question was not found in fancy banking boardrooms or busy international offices.
It was not decided by rich experts far away. Instead, the secret was a very desperate and important policy decision. This was a life or death choice for the country. It was made in the freezing cold winter of 1986. This crucial moment, when the nation had to find a way to survive, set Vietnam on a new path that would change everything for its people. A very poor country. After the war ended in 1975, Vietnam faced a very difficult time. The country was left in ruin. The years that followed were often called the years of ash. Many people had died, and many more had lost their homes. Important infrastructure like roads and bridges was destroyed. Large parts of farmland were damaged or even poisoned from the war. There was also the danger of unexploded bombs, which still hurt people. The new government, based in Hanoi, tried to rebuild the country. They chose a plan inspired by the Soviet Union. This plan meant the government controlled almost everything. Farmers, who had worked their own small plots of land for many generations, were now forced to join large collective farms. They no longer owned their land or the food they grew. This system did not give farmers a good reason to work hard. They were paid the same daily wage, no matter how much food they produced. People felt a deep sense of desperation as their traditional way of life was taken away. The government made big plans for the economy from 1976 to 1981, hoping for fast growth in farming and factories. However, these goals were never met. The economy struggled with small-scale production, low worker output, and a lack of tools and technology. There was not enough food or basic goods for people to buy. Even though Vietnam has some of the most fertile soil in Asia, especially in the rich river deltas, hunger spread across the country. Food shortages became a chronic problem, meaning they happened all the time. Things got much worse because of two quick international problems. In 1978, Vietnam sent its army into Cambodia to stop a cruel government there. This war used up many of Vietnam's scarce resources for a long time.
Then, in 1979, China, which was angry about the war in Cambodia, started a harsh border war with Vietnam. During all this time, the United States also kept a strong economic embargo against Vietnam. This ban on trade stopped Vietnam from trading with many Western countries. It also blocked Vietnam from getting loans and help from big international organizations like the World Bank. By the middle of the 1980s, Vietnam was in a deep crisis. Prices for goods were rising very, very fast, sometimes by hundreds of percent each year. This is known as triple-digit inflation. The government's money was running out quickly. People were hungry, and life was extremely hard. Many talented Vietnamese people, called boat people, left their homes. They risked their lives at sea, hoping to find a better life somewhere else. The country was at a terrifying breaking point.
The government knew something had to change immediately, or the entire nation would collapse. 3. The Big Change. In 1986, Vietnam faced a very difficult choice. The country was in deep trouble. Its leaders had to admit that their old economic plans were not working. This was a big and shocking change. Usually, powerful governments do not say they made mistakes. But at a special meeting, the Communist Party leaders looked closely at their problems. They agreed that their past plans had failed and caused little economic growth. This was a moment of radical self-criticism. This new policy was called the Doi Moi policy, which means renovation or renewal. It was a bold step. The new leader, Nguyen Van Linh, promised to fix the mistakes. He did not blame other countries or bad weather. He said the problems were inside Vietnam. This open talk was important. It showed the government was ready for new ideas. This pragmatism was key. Many people wondered how a strict communist government could change its main ideas without losing control. The leaders found a clever way. They started to use some market economic ideas, but they still called it a socialist-oriented market economy. This helped them keep power while starting to make big changes. The government showed it could abandon old ways when they did not work. The first big change did not happen in big factories or busy cities.
It happened in the countryside, where most people lived and worked. 90% of Vietnamese people were farmers. Before, they worked on government-owned farms called cooperatives. Farmers had no long-term job security and little incentive to work hard. Everyone got the same pay, no matter how much they produced. This system made people lazy, and food became scarce. The new idea was simple: give farmers more ownership of their land. In 1988, the government broke up the big collective farms. They gave small farmers 20-year leases for their land. This meant farmers could keep more of what they grew. This change was called the Rice Revolution. It gave farmers a reason to work harder. They could now sell their crops in the open market. This quickly made food production much better. The new land law in 1993 gave even more long-term security and incentive for farmers to invest in their land. The results were amazing. In just 3 years, by 1989, Vietnam had enough rice. It went from a country that could not feed its own people to one that exported rice. It became one of the world's largest rice exporters. This happened not because of new machines or money from other countries. It happened because of a change in rules and incentives. When farmers had a reason to care for their land and their crops, they produced more. This success in farming showed the government that market ideas could work. It also stabilized the country and fed the people. But to become truly rich, Vietnam had to do something even bigger. It had to open its borders and start trading with its former enemies. This was a very hard choice, but it was the next necessary step for Vietnam to grow. 4. Making new friends. The time for Vietnam to connect with the world had arrived, but this was a very difficult and risky path. For many years, the country had been apart from many others. This isolation meant it did not trade much and did not have many friends abroad. Leaders knew that to grow truly rich, they needed to change this separation. They understood that countries that trade often grow faster. A very important moment came in 1995. The United States and Vietnam, who were once bitter wartime enemies, started a new relationship. President Clinton helped make this happen. This normalization of diplomatic relations was a strong sign to the whole world. It showed that Vietnam was ready for business. Foreign money could now come without fear of old problems or conflicts. This was a crucial step in ending Vietnam's economic separation from Western countries. Vietnam did more than just make friends with America. It also joined important global groups and signed many trade deals. In 1995, it joined the ASEAN Free Trade Area.
Later, in 2007, Vietnam became a member of the World Trade Organization, WTO. This was a very big step for its economy. Joining global trading systems like the WTO brought a surprising benefit. It made Vietnam change its own laws, rules, and government ways inside the country. For example, to join, Vietnam had to improve laws about property, business operations, and how companies work. It also had to set new standards for labor and the environment, and it meant lowering tariffs on goods. These new regulations made Vietnam a better and safer place for foreign companies to invest. It helped create a clearer, rule-based environment. More agreements followed, like the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, in 2018, and the EU-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement, EVFTA, with Europe in 2020. These deals were not just about cheaper trade. They also created strong rules that required Vietnam to keep making its legal system, intellectual property protections, and other standards better. This helped Vietnam build strong internal systems that attracted even more business. With all these legal and political doors now open, something massive was about to happen. A huge flow of foreign corporate money was waiting just out of sight, ready to transform the country's physical landscape forever. 5. Making things for the world. After opening its doors to the world, Vietnam saw a staggering amount of money come in. This was called Foreign Direct Investment, or FDI. Corporate giants like Samsung, Intel, and suppliers for Apple, LG, and Foxconn chose Vietnam for their massive factories. It was truly amazing to see so many global companies investing billions here. Many people wondered why the world's biggest tech companies suddenly picked Vietnam instead of places like China. This change was part of a smart plan often called China Plus One. As workers' salaries in China grew higher, and as geopolitical tensions between the United States and China became more difficult, big companies started to look for other options. Also, the COVID-19 pandemic showed the vulnerabilities of having too many factories concentrated in one single country. Vietnam was in a perfect spot to help these companies find new places for their production. Just 30 years ago, Vietnam had almost no electronics industry to speak of, but now it makes many of the smartphones we use every day. including around 60% of Samsung's annual units. It also produces important parts for computers, called semiconductors, and a large share of athletic shoes for major brands. For example, Vietnam supplies 50% of Nike's shoes and 39% of Adidas's footwear. Samsung alone has invested $23.2 billion in Vietnam, contributing $54.4 billion to Vietnam's exports in 2024.
Intel also built its largest chip assembly and testing center in Ho Chi Minh City, shipping billions of units since it opened. In fact, foreign companies now make around 98% of Vietnam's electronics exports, which reached $126.5 billion in 2024. The country's share in global chip assembly and testing is expected to grow from just 1% in 2022 to almost 9% by 2032. The Vietnamese government actively helped attract these large companies. It offered very good tax deals and made it easy to lease land in special industrial parks built just for factories. The government also created a reliable system for businesses, ensuring its rules were clear and helpful. This meant companies felt safe investing huge amounts of money and building long-term operations. Even cutting-edge technologies like artificial intelligence, AI, are now arriving in Vietnam. In December 2024, NVIDIA, a very important computer chip company, signed an agreement with the Vietnamese government to establish an AI research and development center. This significant step shows how much Vietnam has changed. From being one of the poorest countries with no electronics industry, it has become a major global player in high-tech manufacturing and innovation. But even with these modern factories and billions of dollars pouring in, something else was still needed.
These amazing changes, the shift from poverty to global production, would not be possible without one crucial ingredient. Vietnam had been quietly building this secret weapon for many decades, and it was perhaps its most powerful asset. 6. Smart and young people. Vietnam had a special hidden power behind its fast economic growth: its people. This often underappreciated strength was its human capital, especially its large and young population. With over half of Vietnam's 95 million people being under 35, the country had a significant economic advantage. This benefit is known as the demographic dividend. It meant there were many working-age people available for jobs, with fewer older citizens needing support, which greatly helped the economy expand. The government made very smart decisions to prepare these young people for the future. It invested heavily in education, making sure that primary schooling was free and universal for all children. This strong focus on learning quickly brought impressive results. Vietnamese students consistently performed very well in international assessments, often scoring higher in subjects like mathematics and science than students from much wealthier nations. This showed the excellent quality of their accessible education system. Additionally, Vietnam ensured that its people had cheap and widespread access to the internet, further boosting their skills.
This educated, tech-savvy, and growing workforce was exactly what the new factories and businesses needed. Global companies like Samsung, Intel, and Apple suppliers chose Vietnam because they found not only a large pool of workers, but also skilled engineers, quality control specialists, and supply chain managers. For example, Samsung's Research and Development Center in Hanoi employs thousands of engineers. These bright minds work on creating advanced technologies, including cutting-edge features for new smartphone series. This highly trainable generation helped transform Vietnam into a global leader in electronics manufacturing. At the same time, many young people moved from rural areas to cities, a big change called urbanization. In cities, they found more opportunities for modern jobs and better services, which greatly improved the country's overall productivity and changed the traditional social fabric. This shift from old ways of life was significant. As more jobs became available and income steadily rose, a new, educated, and wealthy urban middle class quickly emerged. These individuals had much more disposable income than their parents or grandparents could have imagined. They began buying international brands, traveling more, and dining out in new restaurants. This increasing domestic spending significantly contributed to Vietnam's overall prosperity. However, this rapid rise of an educated, wealthier society also brought dark new challenges.
These challenges now threaten to shatter the nation's fragile balance, creating new pressures that could test the country's unity and stability in unexpected ways. 7. New money, new problems. The rapid growth of Vietnam brought many good things, but it also created new and serious problems. The country's fast path to wealth had a hidden, darker side that began to show. One big issue was the environment. The air in large cities like Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City often became very dirty. Smoke from factories and the millions of motorbikes filled the air, causing degradation of air quality. Rivers became polluted with waste from industries. Even the Mekong Delta, a vital area for growing rice, faced dangers. Climate change and dams built upstream by other countries threatened its rich waters and land. Another challenge was the growing inequality. While many people became richer, the gap between the very rich and the very poor grew wider. Ethnic minorities, who often live in remote mountainous areas, were frequently left behind. They had fewer chances for good jobs or education compared to the main population in the cities. Serious problems with corruption also appeared. A striking example was a recent case where a rich business person was accused of embezzlement of $12.5 billion. This huge scandal showed that corruption was a deep problem that permeates the system, despite the government's efforts to stop it. Vietnam also faces what experts call the middle income trap.
This means that the methods that help the country get rich quickly, like using cheap labor and welcoming foreign factories, might not be enough to become a truly wealthy nation. To move forward, Vietnam needs new ways to grow, focusing more on its own ideas and advanced technology. Adding to these concerns is a ticking demographic time bomb, a rapidly aging population. The country's advantage of having many young workers is starting to disappear. Soon, there will be a larger number of older people who need care and support, and fewer young people to work and pay taxes. With its cheap labor advantage quickly running out, Vietnam stands on a dangerous edge. Will it find a way to become fully wealthy, or will the miracle of its growth stall halfway? 8. What happens next? Vietnam's journey from a starving, war-torn nation to a thriving global center is truly remarkable. Today, it is a hub for new ideas, making goods for the world, and even working on artificial intelligence. This incredible change offers important lessons for other countries. First, pragmatism was a key lesson. Leaders were willing to change policies that did not work, even if it went against their old ideas. They chose where helped their people most. Second, they focused on agriculture first. By giving farmers more ownership of their land, the country quickly went from food shortages to being a top rice exporter. This fed the nation and built a strong base for growth.
Third, opening its borders to trade, even with former enemies like the United States, brought huge benefits. Joining organizations like the WTO allowed Vietnam to grow its export industries, bringing in more money and jobs. Fourth, Vietnam made huge investments in its people. Providing free, widespread primary education created a skilled and young workforce. This focus on human capital was a true superpower. Fifth, good timing played a big part. Vietnam started opening its economy when global trade was growing, and many companies were looking for new places to build factories outside of China. This China Plus One strategy worked well for Vietnam. However, Vietnam still faces important challenges. It needs to develop its own high-tech industries, moving beyond just assembling products for foreign companies. It must also tackle serious issues like pollution and the increasing gap between the rich and the poor. An aging population and the need to deal with big global powers are also future hurdles. Despite these challenges, millions of Vietnamese families have seen their lives completely transformed. Children now go to university, and parents have stable jobs. People have better health and can dream of a brighter future. This transformation is a powerful example of courageous choices made against great odds. What part of Vietnam's amazing story do you find most inspiring?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.